Hello and welcome back to the Honda Garage YouTube channel. Today we're going to take a closer look into this 1997 Cadillac Eldorado base coupe that I acquired a couple months back and failed to upload a video on. So we're going to do it now. We're going to talk a little bit about its purpose here with me, but we're also just going to talk about this generation Cadillac Eldorado in general. So let's take a look. Okay, so here it is. Unfortunately, I've already been pulling a couple parts, so we don't quite have the full view as I normally would do. However, there's still most of it, so let's take a look and take an opportunity to learn about this Eldorado. Now, Cadillac Eldorado, to begin with, started in 1952, and this is the last and final generation of Eldorado. It was phased out in 2002, a amazing 50-year run, and this is the 12th generation. 12 generations of a car is a lot, and for a nameplate to run for 50 years consecutively is huge. But kind of the turn of the century, SUVs and whatnot started taking over the market, and I'm not sure exactly what reason these kind of went away, but personal coupes, they just kind of disappeared, and maybe the people that were buying these are now just buying luxury SUVs of some sort for their personal transportation. But either case, this is the end of the line. This one in particular is a 1997, and it has a couple options, but it is a base. There was a base model, and there's also a Eldorado ETC. You would see in the letters ETC back here, which is Eldorado Touring Coupe. And there are two engine configurations that you got. With the base model here, you had the LD8, which meant that you had this particular Northstar, which is a torque-focused, horsepower not so much configuration. It's just very minute differences. I think it's in the valve tray in just a little bit. So this makes 275 horsepower and like 290 foot-pounds of torque, whereas the L37, which is the engine code for the Touring Coupe engine, it is going to have 295 horsepower and only a little bit less in torque. I think it's like 285. So L37 is the more aggressive one, if you will, but they're very, very similar. I think also the L37 has a slightly higher RPM redline from the factory than this LD8 that you see here. Now, for performance stance, it doesn't really make that much of a difference because you're going to go way past that anyway, or you can always, swap the parts from one to the other. These cars are equally cheap because they have Northstars. So let's step back again. Let's talk about the Northstar in general. These cars, if I remember, these cars started 1991 or 2, somewhere in there. They may have started without the Northstar, but 1993, everything for Cadillac became a universal package. The Northstar system, which meant not just the engine, but they also had the same matching air ride suspension and traction control systems. Basically, every part that operates the car is the same across the board for Cadillac, excluding what would come to be the Escalade, which of course would be based on the LS platform, and it's a big old SUV. So that thing's completely different. But all the Cadillac cars throughout the 90s until you get into the Escalades, and even into the early 2000s, all the cars still stayed on the Northstar system, which consisted of those three major parts: braking, traction control, as well as the air ride suspension, as well as the Northstar engine. And the Northstar engine, if you do not know, or perhaps you already do because, well, most people know about it, have a notorious problem for eating head gaskets and overheating and basically expiring themselves. And that was due to a lack of head bolt size in the heads going into the block. They were fine thread and they were too small. So this is an aluminum block. What happens is these cars also, to meet emission standard, run at 210 degrees from the factory, which is really hot. There's a lot of pressure there from that heat, and with that amount of pressure, it wasn't so much that the head gasket was an issue, it was that the head actually lifted off the block and pulled the threads out of the block with the bolts. So then, you replace your head gasket and you bolt the thing back on and it would just blow right again because the head's already loose. Sometimes it will warp heads, or in worst case scenario, that engine way back over there, there it is, it cracks all the way across the side. So it's really bad, and that's what makes many of these 90s, early 2000s Cadillacs really, really cheap, because they are known for their unreliability in that department. But let's talk about the reasons why that's not the end of the world, though, because though that was a huge issue, it did end up finally resolving itself towards the end. I think starting in 2000, the issues got toned down a lot because they did increase the bolt head size, and then they did it again for 2006. So the 2006 to 2010 cars really don't have that issue, and the 2000 to 2005 less often per se. It's these much earlier ones that are much more notorious for it. That being said, the Northstar came out for 1993 and it lasted until 2010. That's nearly a 30-year run. 27 years is a long time for an engine to run along. So it wasn't a complete failure in that regard. I mean, if you look up how many of these cars all sold with the Northstar, as well as there were a couple exceptions. It wasn't exclusively Cadillac. It was to begin with, as things always are. But after a little while, Oldsmobile had to take at it, Buick had to take at it, the Pontiac had to take on it. Eventually the other divisions all had their own take at it, but it was exclusive there to begin with. So that's a little bit of background on the Northstar. It is a very smooth, it is an attempt at foreign competition, I suppose, with being overhead cams and an all-aluminum engine. Always front-wheel drives with these until you get to the STSV or the XLR. Those are longitudinal mounted Northstars, and they have a little supercharger on them, and they make I think upwards of 440 horsepower. So these can be had with some performance, but it's very uncommon, and there's very little in the aftermarket for them. So most people don't really bother with them, though I've seen a couple obscure swaps here and there. The design of this car is inspired by the Cadillac Solitaire. I think that debuted in 1988. If you don't know about it, you should look up that car, and you might be able to note some of the similarities between it. The Solitaire had this big giant light bar going across it and whatnot. The Eldorado here is a little bit more refined, but we still retain the tall vertical Cadillac taillights traditionally. I think it is a very well done car. I think the body lines are really cool. One of the things that makes it kind of neat is that it's got this really wide kind of stance where it's got this, sharp squared off edge here, kind of a handsome shoulder look, but it comes out a ways, like it's got some meat there. And then you add on top of that, you got these factory kind of wheel flares here, which are really cool. And then they add in chrome accents all along, just as they do. The lettering is very regal, if you would. Looks really nice there. 16-inch chrome wheels, and let's take a look at one of the hubcaps here with the gold crest. Those are really cool. These wheels are actually in really good shape. And again, the wheel flare also on the front, matching the rears, and one of the last cars left to have the typical extremely long front hood. These kind of went away after these cars ended in 2002. This car optionally has this soft top here. This is the last generation Cadillac that you could get a soft top like this, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. This one's actually preserved in really nice shape. I really like it, and from what I can tell, it does not leak, so that's really cool. Kind of the end of the soft tops in that era. One of the profound Cadillac features is on this trunk here. It's going to be a self-closing trunk, so when you lower it down, you just gently lower it down, it will latch, and the trunk will be sitting up a little ways, and an electric motor will pull it down and pull it tight for you. And that way you don't have to slam your trunk really hard, or it doesn't take a lot of strength to do so. Makes it easier for those who aren't as strong, but do be careful. You close it and think it's not closed all the way and try and grab under it. That's a good way to have some pain in your finger for a while. You won't lose your finger, but it'll hurt. Ask me how I know. And the power antenna here, that's pretty neat. This kind of stuff went away after this generation car. This car also has this cool feature. This was an optional feature. This 12 CD changer. That's right, 12 CDs. This little box here will pull out and you can load it up with CDs. This box used to reside here in the trunk, so you'd take that little box out, put in all your CDs, put it in, close the trunk, and then while you're driving along, you can choose between the different 12 CDs up front in the console. That being said, we'll take a look inside here in just a moment. This here, the gas cap, has the feature of it being a power gas cap, where there's a button inside to release the cap, so that way nobody can come in here and try and siphon your gas. Gas siphoning was a problem during the 80s, so that still resides right there for that. Let's step in here. Really long doors. These kind of lengthwise make me think of the fourth generation F-body Camaro and Firebird. Similar door length on that, though these doors don't seem to have the sagging problem that most of the F-bodies do. Doesn't smell that great in here, but I've already stripped some of the interior, but we'll dive in. This car optionally has this really cool black interior, which is not often seen. All of these have tan leather. This one's really cool. It has the black leather, so looks very modern, even for a 1997. This thing is, how old is that? Shoot, 97, 2007. Give me a moment here. 17. It's 25 years old. 25 years old, and it still looks relatively modern. I think that wood grain certainly does help. It does have a little bit of crackage right there. Not much though, but it does look nice in here. The chrome handles and such. Course power everything as usual. Memory seating, which is kind of a big thing in the 90s. And we have the Bose speaker system installed. And it says Bose right there as well. And the volume controls are when Cadillac was running this funky steering wheel before they decided to update. They have these weird toggles kind of back here for climate control and for volume and selecting your song. They're kind of hard to get to. I don't really like them, but that's how you did it in your Cadillac. Looking here at the gauge cluster, or driver information center, DIC, we have very simple, easy to read gauges. I really like the analog over the digital for the main display, and we can see we redline here at about 6,000 RPM, and you have a temperature gauge and a fuel gauge, and that's it. Speedometer goes up to 140 plus, but you will get a ton of information down here, including reading and clearing engine codes on your own in this cluster, and it will tell you any problems that it has with the car, including anything that is a problem with the air system or the braking system or any of the other systems installed in the car. information about them will pop up there. And it's possible as well to program this cluster to show you different things all the time as well. So very neat piece there. This has the slightly older style GM column with the square and round key set up in here. This one has a Cadillac emblem inside of it. Later on, I think starting in 2000, they will move to the more modern style steering column. Has a pull switch here for the lights and a very nice feeling dimmer switch right here. Of course, a button for fog lamps, which I believe are standard. And you have a compass mirror up here. I'm not sure if this one may tell you the temperature as well. I'm not sure. Black headliner. Looks to be in great shape. These sun visors look nice. And they do have their own little dimmy switches on here, which is kind of funny. Sliding extenders. And I don't believe these also, no, they do not pull out. Later GM cars, the whole entire sun visor will slide on the little rod up here. So keep an eye out for that, just in case you're not sure if your sun visor doesn't go any further. If it does not have one of these, it may be the entire thing slides. Ugh. These are not sure how many weigh, but pretty nice seats. Of course, full power in any direction, and then as well as they have two airbag settings, a low and a high, which surprisingly are still working. These also have adjustable headrest. They just kind of move whichever way you want, so that's good stuff there. A little switch right here to get to the back, and there is a whole hose of electronics out here in the trunk / behind the back seat area. And what this is the body control module, which stores the security functions and keys for the security system in there. So that's why that box is a little bit hidden and harder to get to per se. There's also a fuse box. This little box right here is also a fuse junction for a lot of functions for it that you can access from inside the trunk. So if you're having a problem and you think you've checked all the fuses, you might want to check and see if it's possibly one of those. If you've already done your checks and you can't seem to figure out why something isn't getting power, maybe a fuse in there that you may not realize is there. You have to pull back the trunk carpet to know that it's there. Of course, in this particular car, I have hacked out this hole here to change the fuel pump, because fuel pump was bad when I got it, but that's what made it $400. So good with me. We got some rear air control here. You got your own little blower motor speed, which is really nice, and you can close and open the vent still there, and got little tilties. That's kind of nice. Got a little cigarette or 12-volt outlet there, and that pretty much makes this car. Ugh. So that's a little bit of... Oh, what's in the door? No idea. Oh, piece of plastic. So that's a little bit of history and background on the Cadillac Eldorado 12th generation. And you might look out for 2002 models. There are special, I think it's white and red only editions, which is to match the original Eldorado that came out in 1952. They also started out as only, it's either red and white or red and black, one of the two. I'm pretty sure it's red and white. You'll have to double check me on that. But there are some special editions there in 2002 if you're a car collector of any kind. That's kind of one of those special models that kind of just floats there under the radar. Nobody's really looking for them, but very nice cars to have for sure. For me personally, this is our new engine donor for the Fiero project. As if you've been following along, I'm sure you could guess. This engine here is in healthy shape. Despite what it looks like, it's in healthy shape. It is not cracked. It does not have a blown head gasket or anything at the moment. The oil's nice. I actually drove this car on the highway for a while, and it drives really smooth. has no engine codes, it's good to go. So great contender for a rebuild, so that's what we're going to use. Currently most of the way through the process of pulling this engine out, and then we'll be moving it onto our cradle here with those new bushings and putting it in the car. So exciting stuff happening there. But that's going to wrap up this tour of this 1997 Cadillac Eldorado. I will see you on the next episode.